Hello there and welcome back to this Angular course. Today we're going to be having a look at child routes. So child routes essentially allow us to further organize our application beyond what routing itself provides. So we're going to go over exactly what child routes is in more detail in a second here, but essentially it allows us to place sub-routes of routes that we go to within the actual routes themselves as to reduce redundancy. That said, let's actually have a look at a example of where we would actually use child routes. So, oftentimes we need to create subroutes for routes. For example, consider this situation. So we have a route with the path /user/ and then a URL parameter called ID with the component user home. So the user home component would probably display, some information for the user with the current ID that we have. So maybe make a backend call to some kind of backend server, which would fetch a user from a database and go ahead and return him to the Angular application. And maybe we would see some details for the user, not a lot of details, but just some details, and maybe a header, footer, things like that. But again, nothing too complex here. So we don't see all of the details for a user, and we can't edit the user. Then we have another route with a path /user/ and then we insert the ID for the user and then /details with the component view user details in addition to user home. So we have all the same information as user home, but then we have additional parts to our application as well. And then finally, we have a route with the path /user/ and then URL parameter with the ID of the user /edit with the component edit user in addition to user home. So again, we have all of the same functionality. So essentially, we have everything that is in the user home component inside the edit user component as well, but just with some additions in our case that allow us to edit the user. So it would be redundant to create all of these separate components and routes in one file. So instead of putting all of this into one file, and each of these components, creating separate components, for example, edit user with user home as well. So instead, we would make the last two routes child routes of /user/ID. So essentially what we would do is inside user ID, we would put its own routing functionality with its own router outlet where we can go ahead and navigate to it based on which URL, and it would display the corresponding component inside user home at that router outlet based on which URL we navigate to. Okay, so I understand at this point you may be very, very confused, and don't worry, this is quite confusing. Not too confusing, but it's quite confusing. So let's actually have a look at implementing this specific scenario in the actual code. Okay, so here we are in our code. Let's go ahead and go into our src folder here into app. Let's go ahead and delete our second component because we don't need that anymore. Let's delete that, and then same goes for the first component. We'll keep the not found component though. All right, there we go. Let's delete the first component and the second component as well. Let's also go ahead and go into app component.typescript, or nope, module.typescript. We can go ahead and remove first and second component imports here. Whoops. Yep, there we go. And from the declarations as well. All right, there we go. Let's remove that, save that. Then let's go ahead and go to app.component.html. And, well, actually, no, we don't. Yeah, we can just go ahead and remove this HTML as a whole. We'll just keep the router outlet. So that's the only thing that we'll keep here. All right, there we go. Awesome. I think that's actually all. Is it all? Yeah, we can go ahead and delete. We'll delete this as well. So we can go ahead and delete the navigate to all of this. We can also delete, except, yeah, even the title. We'll just delete all of this. Keep it empty. We're going to keep this clean to avoid confusion. So that's why I always tend to delete everything that we don't need so that we can avoid confusion. And on that note, we can go and delete this router here as well. All right, there we go. Awesome. So now we've got a pretty clean application here, Unit 6 Lesson 7. Now what we're going to go ahead and do inside here is ng generate component called user. So let's go ahead and generate that user component, give it a second, and there we go. We now have our user component. Now let's cd into that user component. And let's go ahead and do ng generate, and then we're going to do details, ng generate component details. There we go, ng generate component details, and then ng generate component view. All right, there we go. So now, inside user, okay, that didn't actually create inside user. That's, did we not cd into user? Yeah, we didn't actually cd into user. That's, oh, we needed to cd into src app. All right. So let's just go, let's go ahead and put these files into user, to put these components into user here. And then we also need to update app component TypeScript, or no, module TypeScript, to reflect the changes. So we're going to do /user/details. And then same here, user/view/view.component. There we go. All right, so there we go. So now we do actually have our components ready to go. Now we're going to implement the actual functionality of displaying these subcomponents inside user based on the URL that we actually insert into the browser. Okay, so in order to go ahead and configure these child routes, the first thing that we're going to do inside user is create a new file called user.routes.typescript. All right, there we go. Now, inside here, what we're going to do is we're going to do export const and user child routes. There we go. And that is going to be an array of these path components. Let's go to our application routing module here, and just go ahead and copy a path here. Copy that. There we go. And the path here is going to be slash. Let's just do user user details. Okay. And the component here is going to be details component. All right. Awesome. And then we're also going to have user view. I should have done user edit. I accidentally did a view component there, but it doesn't really matter all that much. Whoops, not view child, view component. There it is. All right, and let's replace these with single quotation marks, because TSLint is just crazy. All right, there we go. So we got that. Let's go ahead and, so now we can save that. So this is just an array where we configure the actual components here. It doesn't actually, right now, it doesn't actually do anything. We need to go ahead and go into here, into our application routing module.typescript. Let's delete these two paths here. Actually, we don't need to delete them. We can just go ahead and delete one. And right here, what we're going to do is we're going to do path equals user slash and then colon ID. There we go. So the path is going to be user and then a URL parameter. We're going to pass in the ID of the user. And the component is going to be the user component. User component. All right, there we go. And then we're going to specify a property here called children. Okay. And that children is just going to go ahead and take in this user child routes that we have here. So just user child routes. All right, and there we go. So now we do actually have, in general, we do actually have child routes set up. One thing we do need to do, though, inside user.component.html is add in this router outlet here. So router outlet, and it's going to go ahead and place the actual child routes inside this router outlet. All right, awesome. So that is actually pretty much all. Let's go ahead and open up first of all, we need to run this. So let's do ng serve. All right, give that a second here. So hopefully you understand what's going on here. So it's essentially going to, depending on the URL that we insert, it's going to either insert the details component here or the view component inside user.component.html. All right, so let's go ahead and go to localhost port 4200. There we go. And right now we get URL not found. Okay, let's do /user/1. And you're going to see that that just takes us to user works. Okay, now let's do /user/1/details. Whoops, that's what did we actually insert here? User details. Whoops, user details. There we go. And now you can see that we get user works, and then under that we get details works as well. And then we can go to user view. And now we get user works and view works. And there we go. That is how we utilize child routes in Angular. All right, so one thing that I will go over here before we end this lesson, and I did forget to mention this previously. This is sort of unrelated, but I thought I would mention it. In user child routes, in order to add some kind of validation to our objects that we insert into this array here, we can make this array of type routes, like that. There we go. And that's just going to add validation, make sure that we don't insert anything that we don't need. So for example, now if we try to insert something like DHSJ equals something like this, just like that, you're going to see that this actually won't work. It's going to give us an error. It doesn't exist in type route. But if we don't have this type routes, then this is going to be totally fine, and it's not going to give us any errors. So that's just, I thought I'd mention that it is something, it's a good practice to use that. So go ahead and do make your route arrays of type routes. So let's go and do the same thing here in our application module here as well. We're going to make it of type routes. There we go, just like that.